Hi, and thanks very much for joining me. I'm Dean the Vaping Biker, and today we're going to be doing something a wee bit different, and that is discussing a very, very important topic, which is advocacy in Australia. Now, I recognise this is not the sexiest thing to be discussing, and I know a lot of you may tune out, but please, please don't, because the potential for having this affect the rest of the world is quite significant. So what I've got today is I've got the marvellous Mr. Sam, the Vaping Bogan. Thank you very much for joining me, sir.
G'day, dickhead. How are you?
I'm all right, my friend. I'm all right. So what we're going to do is I wanted to get some ideas or some knowledge from someone over there, and obviously you're very strong on advocacy as well as fully aware of both the consumer and the retail aspect of what goes on there in southern Australia. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah. I've worked in a vape shop. Obviously, I do all the reviewing shit, so I'm dealing with sort of, the businesses on the back end and obviously the customers on the storefront. And obviously, I'm always talking about advocacy as much as I'm sure it pisses off people. Every fucking video is banging on about it. But yeah, it's something that, like you say, what happens here in Australia can very easily have a flow-on effect into other places around the world. Unfortunately, we haven't taken notes from the UK or New Zealand. What we do, you could see, adapted by other governments, which would be very bad news.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of advocacy is very focused on America, which is great, obviously, because there is a lot of requirements over in the States. And obviously we know a lot about things like the TPD over here in the UK. But there is a huge amount. I mean, have you got any idea how many vapors there are that are going to be affected by what we're going to be discussing today?
The figures on the amount of vapors in Australia in general are either non-existent or pretty sort of random in terms of how many people are actually vaping. But it would definitely be at this point, in the hundreds of thousands of people in Australia already vaping. Yeah. In terms of how these laws will affect South Australia, well, yeah, there's definitely going to be thousands of vapors affected, and there's also going to be hundreds of employees and dozens of businesses that are going to be, really crippled by these new regulations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we just get into the real nitty-gritty of it, with regards to the amount of vape shops over in Australia, are they kind of fairly commonplace in this day and age? Is there, most cities and towns got at least one or two vape shops?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Very, very common place to find vape shops. In every major city in Australia, you will find, brick and mortar stores. You'll find online stores. In South Australia, we probably actually have the highest concentration of physical brick and mortar stores of any state in Australia. Gotcha. I did a vape shop tour video a year and a half ago, I reckon it was, around Australia. Or maybe it was about this time last year. It was about a year ago. Yeah. And I visited nine stores, and that wasn't even half of them. Gotcha. I just did the 9 that were within 15 to 20k radius of where I live. Yeah. And I hit 9 vape stores. So there's quite a lot. And there's also the majority, if you look at the total juice manufacturers and online vendors, there's a huge portion of that is located in South Australia. We've got some of the biggest online stores. We do have the biggest online store, and we've got a lot of the biggest manufacturers, the juice makers.
Yeah, and that's another big thing. I mean, obviously Australia is a big old place, so online is very important for vapors over there that may have to travel a considerable different distance to get to a vape shop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're so spread out. It's there's one thing I noticed when I was in London. It was about this time in last year, around about May. I did a vape shop tour around London, and I hit about 10 stores, and that was just between London Central around Shoreditch. I went over to Camden and around to wherever Custom Vapes is and a few other shops. Just within a very small radius of central London. And there were fucking vape shops everywhere. It was crazy. Whereas in Australia, we've got such a huge landmass that, our suburbs are a lot bigger and they're a lot more spread out. And so people can't get to brick and mortar stores. They end up ordering online. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a little discussion about what's actually going to go on. I pulled up the sahealth.sa.gov.au, which I will make sure I link down in the description. And the document there that is talking selling e-cigarettes in South Australia, retailer fact sheet. Is that the best one to be using, do you think?
It's probably the easiest one to understand, yeah, unless you're a lawyer and you want to, you know, sit there and read through the legal terms that they're actually laid out under legislation. That this is a good one. This is essentially what the government's kind of issued so that your average shop owner can kind of understand what they're facing and you know what they've got to comply with. There's a certain bunch of them that will come into effect on the 31st of March, so we're only looking at 4 or 5 weeks away, and then the rest of them will come in as of the 1st of October.
Okay, cool. So let's break this down quickly for the viewers. We won't have a massive video from this one. Under the laws for selling e-cigarette products, under these laws from 31st of March, so like you're saying, just in a few weeks' time, it's an offence to sell or supply e-cigarette products to a person under the age of 18, which I think is fairly, yeah, no problem with that one.
We're all happy with that. We're all happy with that.
Absolutely.
You go to the next one, responsible persons. We're all happy with that.
Yeah.
Photographic identification. You've got to provide, you know, evidence. Obviously, if you're under, you know, if you look like you're under 18. Or I think, you know, the usual laws in Australia is if you look under 25, they can ask you for ID. So yeah, we're all fine with that one. That's no problems at all.
And they do outline also that if someone is selling a product to an under 18-year-old, then both the salesperson and the manager of the store can be prosecuted for that one.
Yeah, you're looking at up to $20,000 for the first offence, and you know up to $40,000 for subsequent offences. So yeah, I mean we all agree that we shouldn't be selling vapes to kids.
Absolutely. So we're 100% behind that one. Now then, the next point that we've got going on here, it's an offence to sell e-cigarette products by retail without a retail tobacco and e-cigarette merchant's licence. Now, that was something that I sort of had a brief discussion about on my Monday Night Live, because I'm fairly aware that there's another country that's done a similar thing, and they refuse to basically give out any of these licenses to allow people to sell vaping products. Have you got a kind of a handle on how the government are doing that? Is the application process and approval process to get this certification realistic?
I think it's not going to be too hard for the whole tobacco licensing sort of thing, because every 7-Eleven, whether it's an official 7-Eleven or it's just, you know, your 7-Eleven type mum and pops type store, you know, run by, an independent sort of thing, they're able to sell cigarettes, and they've got to obtain the same tobacco license to sell those cigarettes. So your average, you know, we call them delis here. They don't really exist anymore thanks to large corporations shoving out the small businesses. But, you know, a deli, which, you know, your pies, your pasties, your milk, your cigarettes, you know, your basic, you know, lunches and that kind of thing, they've all got tobacco licenses. So, you know, unless they change their issuing of tobacco licenses, I don't see getting the tobacco license too hard, but it will obviously cost you as a business some money.
It'll be interesting to know kind of once a vape shop, a particular vape shop applies for that, if the cost is so substantial that it's going to throw out sort of smaller vape shops and stop them being able to exist, or if because they are particularly a vape shop, if they get looked at under a different light, if you like.
As far as I can tell, again, I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I can tell, what the South Australian government's done is they're very lazily just thrown everything from vaping in with tobacco. So there shouldn't really be any difference in terms of obtaining the license as it would be if you were to sell cigarettes, because they're putting it in the same legislation. Yeah. So if they were suddenly to say, oh, but you're a vape shop, so no, we're actually going to deny that, well, that would be contradictory to the law that they've already put it in. So I would expect that there shouldn't be any issues with being a vape shop selling, you know, vapes, getting a tobacco license.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's also an offence to provide or offer to provide free samples, prizes, gifts or other benefits, including through sponsorship, competitions and rewards in connection to the sale of e-cigarette products. Potentially not a huge issue when you look at it on a macro level, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, that would mean that if a new vapor, if a smoker goes into a vape shop and wants to buy just a vape pen to get going, like the vape shop can't throw in a bottle of juice or something like that, presumably.
You can't throw in a bottle of juice, but the real damage that particular point does is it prevents shops from doing samples, testers, or even vaping any e-juice or vaping in general in a vape store.
Right.
So you can't test, you can't try. You know, you go into a vape store, you've never vaped before, you have a chat, you want to buy a system, and then you really are at the mercy of lucky dip in terms of getting the flavor that you want. You can't try it. That's a sample. That's classed as a promotional thing because it's with the intent, obviously, to sell more e-juice. So it's really going to massively hamper the consumer in terms of finding what they're looking for as a new vapor, or even as a seasoned vapor who just wants to try something new. You're going to have to buy a bottle of juice and hope that you like it.
Yeah. Okay, so also it's an offence to sell e-cigarette products from temporary outlets, sales trays and vending machines. Is that a thing? Did you have that previously? Did you have vending machines?
Yeah. It's not a thing. I mean, I've seen in other countries that have started to adopt some vending machine type points of sale, but it's not a thing here in South Oz in terms of any vending machines. So that I wouldn't really see being a factor to existing setups anyway.
Gotcha. And we've also, you're not allowed to use e-cigarettes in public places that are currently smoke-free under law, which I think is reasonable, isn't it?
Look, I mean, I disagree that vaping is the same as smoking, and, you know, the effects of secondhand vapor, we all know from the research, is not the same as smoking. But if we're going to face regulations, I can live with not vaping in non-smoking areas. I think we can all live with that one. Absolutely.
And I don't know what it's like over there, but there's been people in the UK and I guess in the States as well, but they're like, well, this isn't smoking, so I'm going to blow dirty great big clouds while I'm walking around the supermarket or something like that, which just doesn't help anyone, does it?
Exactly, and that sort of shit, you know, is definitely not going to help our cause in terms of getting non-vapors to understand the difference between tobacco combustibles and non-tobacco, you know, e-cigarettes. So, yeah, I mean, I think that one we can. It's very hard to regulate or police vape etiquette. Yeah. You know, like, what law could you bring in that, you know, is going to stop people from being a wanker? You know, if you just say don't vape where you can't smoke, it stops all those wankers. So we can kind of live with that one.
Exactly. Okay, so now we hit the real kind of the stuff that's really going to kick people by the balls. I mean, the other stuff's not great by any stretch, but from October the 1st this year, 2019, it's an offence to advertise and promote e-cigarette products. I imagine both online, through the media and in person, is it?
Yeah, so basically, you know, you won't be able to have an A-frame out the front of your vape shop. That's advertising. You won't be able to have, you know, any sorts of Facebook posts or a website advertising the sale of your cigarettes, and I suppose it ties into some of the next few points, and that is there is zero online sales going to be allowed to South Australians or from South Australians. Yeah,
and I will explore that a little bit more in a minute. But when it comes to the advertising aspect, the UK did a weird thing. You couldn't do it on TV, you couldn't do it in a bunch of places, but you could do it on like the side of a bus or something like that, which just makes no sense. But as far as Australia goes, advertising of any kind pretty much is just off the table. There's none of it.
Yeah.
So
pretty much.
So what this means is smokers are still going to think that vaping is bad. They're not going to be educated in any way, shape or form, and they're not going to have the normality involved that vaping should have. That's going to mean that they think vaping is actually an alternative that they should look into.
Yeah, if people don't see vaping, A, because there's no advertising for it and promotion of it, and B, you know, they're not. So A, they're not going to be exposed to it in the first place, and B, like you're saying, it gives the aura or the impression that it's somehow bad, negative, that it's it's the same as cigarettes. If we're not allowed to let people know, that this is a safer, more cost-effective way of quitting, cigarettes. People are just not going to hear about it because there's no promotion allowed.
No, exactly. Okay, so also it's an offence to have e-cigarette products on display at point of sale. Yeah, and we'll look at the internet sales in a second. So at point of sale, so in a vape shop, no products. No products on view, nothing.
And this is where the tobacco legislation pre-existing basically ties in with what they've thrown vaping in with. Is so currently in Australia, you can't display cigarettes in a retail aspect. So we've got these, shops with little roller doors that come down over their shelves, or blacked out screens or whatever. You go into the store and you have a little white piece of paper that says Peter Stuyvesant's Blue, Benson and Hedges Classic, and the price next to it.
Yeah.
So unless you know that you want that particular product, there's not going to be anything. You wouldn't know, whether. So a brand new, vapor walks into a store and they see, the Squid Industries double barrel V3, $69.99. Mm-hmm. But you don't know what that is. You don't know what it looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just words.
Yeah. It's a nightmare, isn't it? I did look on that document as well, and it says, how will customers know what e-cigarette products they have and how much they are? And the price tickets are permitted and must be compliant with the tobacco and e-cigarette products regulations. These regulations cover the size, colour and information that can be displayed on the price tickets, advertising of discounted prices using special price tickets or other means is prohibited. So... Yeah, I mean, do they, each one of those tickets, do they have cigarettes or whatever will damage you and all that sort of stuff like you have on a packet of cigarettes here in the UK or something?
I don't know about warnings, but if it's anything like cigarettes, all they're going to be able to display is literally the name of the product, the Bonza 1.5 RDA and then a price next to it. Yeah. And that's it. Because that's all you've got with cigarettes. Yeah. It just says Benson and Hedges or Peter Stuyvesant's or Dunhill, and then it has the price. Yeah. It doesn't have anything else.
Yeah.
So I would suspect it's going to be the same for vaping.
Yeah. It does say that price boards, one prescribed price board is permitted and must be compliant with regulations covering the size, colour and information to be displayed. And that to me sounds mental as well, because if you've got a board that you're only allowed a certain size, your vape shop, when you take into account all of the juices and flavours and...
can't have it on there. It won't fit.
No, so
it will not fit, and that's what I mean, and that's why it's going to be impossible to have the list or the array of products that you have available on display. People are going to have to know what they want and hope that you stock it. They won't know. They won't know if you stock it.
Yeah, exactly. And the final point, we'll expand on things in a little while with regards to the actual impact, but the final thing that is going to be an offence as of the 1st of October will be sell e-cigarette products by indirect orders, including internet sales. So that is hugely significant. We discussed earlier on about the people that rely on internet to be able to get the stuff because it may be many miles before they can reach a vape shop, but that really is going to be a significant impact on the vaping landscape over there, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. That's probably the biggest one. That's going to basically just prohibit a lot of consumers from getting their vape products. That is the one that is going to cost lives. That is the one that's going to force some vapors back onto cigarettes. For instance, if you live in Port Augusta, which is around it's a 4-hour drive, 3-hour drive from where I am. You're talking a few hundred kilometres. There's no vape shops there. There's no brick and mortar stores over there. So vapors in that situation are relying on internet sales. Yeah. Now, if they can order from an Australian site, happy days, and get it to them. But the problem is this new regulation regarding internet sales, according to the South Australian government, is going to prohibit interstate stores from selling to South Australians. Right. So if you're an online vape store based in Victoria, if you were to sell to a South Australian and the government in South Australia suspects you of doing that, all they need to do is order one thing from you in Victoria, and if you send it to South Australia, to the whoever the fucking government body regulating it, receives that order, boom, you're done. That you've just broken the South Australian law. So you as a business in Victoria are not going to risk, legislation with South Australia and a legal battle to sell to one customer in South Australia. So it's going to mean that interstate shops will no longer sell to South Australians. South Australian online stores won't be able to operate at all. And so that person in Port Augusta who used to order their stuff online can no longer do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's obviously one very significant aspect, but another very, very strong aspect of this is the loss of jobs and the loss of employment by people that work in those industries. That's going to impact a lot of people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the daft point of this legislation is. It's not going to stop businesses from selling e-cigarettes in South Australia. All it's going to do is force all of that revenue, force all of that employment, force all of the goodness that you get from a business operating in the highest unemployed state in Australia. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in Australia. And you're forcing these businesses who were set up employing and bringing in revenue through tax and everything else to go into state.
Yeah.
I know of at least 3 juice manufacturers and have a large online presence as well who are simply moving states. They're not going to stop what they're doing. They've already got a massive customer base around Australia. They're not going to shut up shop and just go home. They're going to move into states. So now Victoria and New South Wales and other states are taking all of that tax revenue that South Australia was getting. They're taking all of the employment and the jobs that were in South Australia, and they're just moving them to another fucking state.
Yeah.
It's not saving any children. It's not fucking preventing any of the ridiculous, aims that the government has in mind. It's simply just losing us money and losing us jobs.
Absolutely. And those companies that are moving out, obviously, they're not going to be able to sell to people in South Australia via the internet because they'll be over in Victoria or wherever else.
Correct.
So,
and, you've got businesses here that are employing up to 25 staff to process their online distribution. And all of those jobs are now gone. Literally millions of dollars in turnover from these businesses. These are not little, mum and pop, we'll do a couple of bottles of juice here, a couple of bottles of juice there. We're talking about businesses that employ 5, 10, 15, 20 people, are processing anywhere from 250 to 500 orders a day, sending out across Australia and the world. And all of that is just being said, no, sorry, none of that matters. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
Daft. Absolutely daft.
Do you know what it means to worldwide orders? So obviously we know that you can't order from sort of other states that are a little bit more lenient on vaping, but can Australian or Southern Australian vapers order from America or the UK or wherever else?
And that is the only saving grace that we have in this whole shit show, is that because it's just South Australian law, they cannot affect international orders. They do not have the grounds or the legislation or the law to prevent a store in New Zealand or a store in the United States or a store in the United Kingdom from shipping to a South Australian. So if you are a South Aussie and you buy online, visit the New Zealand stores are probably your best option because they're the closest, the shipping is going to be the cheapest and the exchange rate, blah, 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 or the UK or the US. So, yeah, it's going to force, again, a whole bunch of income. So everyone that was in South Australia that was vaping and was ordering their stuff online is now, instead of buying from an Australian business where we're keeping the money within Australia, we're keeping people in jobs, we're keeping the production of our own e-juices, is now being shifted overseas. Everybody else is getting that revenue. All that money is being sent offshore.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's going to cost the consumer more money as well.
Yeah, it's going to cost more money. It's going to cost more shipping. The flow-on effects are huge.
Yeah. So some people at this point, when it comes to e-juice, would say, well, why not just make your own? And that's another issue you've been struggling with over there for quite some time anyway, right?
Well, I mean, e-juice has always been an issue because we can't sell juice from within Australia with nicotine. You've got to order your nicotine from overseas. So people have already been having to do that. I don't know whether that's a huge factor, the nicotine issue, because it doesn't really change anything. We've never had nicotine legal here.
Yeah.
It's more about all of the other stuff, the essentials that you need, like your juice and your hardware, not being easily accessible. And, for a new vapor, going into a vape store and not being able to have someone explain to you, how do you set up this new POC-X? How does it work?
Absolutely.
How do I prime a coil? if you're a rebuilder or if you're new to rebuilding and maybe you don't install your own coils, maybe you get the vape store to install your own coils. They can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
They can't re-wick your cotton. It's going to force people to go outside of Australia or give up on vaping altogether. Because, you know, if you've been going to your local, you know, vape store and you've been getting your juice from there or your hardware from there, and suddenly that store can't sell to you anymore or shuts down because they can't do their online sales, and their online sales were 50% of their revenue, and now that's gone, and you can't open that store anymore, so that store shuts down. And Beryl over here in Port Augusta, she can't go to the vape shop anymore. She's old. She doesn't use credit cards. She doesn't use the internet. She's not going online. What's she going to do? She's going to go back to cigarettes. It's just fucking easier, isn't it?
Also, if Beryl's local vape shop is closed down, she might not know that you can go and order from America or wherever else. So that's
exactly.
you know, it's that, and there's no way of being able to tell her that that's an option.
Not everybody's watching YouTube reviewers. You know, in fact, majority of vapors out there don't give a shit what I say and have never seen a YouTube review.
Exactly.
And that's just fine. We're here for the bigger picture. And those people that don't go on the internet and don't see where they can get their shit have only been exposed to a physical, you know, brick and mortar store. They're not going to have that anymore.
Yeah. So with regards to the advertising aspects and so on, I know that when it came to the TPD here in the UK, there was quite a significant concern over whether it would impact people like myself doing reviews. That was something that was being looked into by another entity. And even to this point, I don't think we've ever had full-on clarification of that. Have you been able to find out if it's going to affect you and how you do what you do so well?
Yeah, good question. A lot of viewers, obviously, when they heard about these laws coming in, were like, "Oh, fuck, what's going to happen to you, dude?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Yeah, you know, it definitely was a concern for me when it first sort of came out that they were going to bring these in."
Yeah.
Having spoken to a lot of people in the industry, having looked at the legislation myself, from what we can tell, it's all based on retail or online or phone sales. It's all about the selling or promotion of products with the intent to sell.
Gotcha.
And because as a reviewer, I don't sell or retail anything. I don't have any online stores. I don't have a brick and mortar. You know, none of that is associated with me.
Yeah.
And I don't accept any money for reviews. You know, I'm very strict about being an independent reviewer. So if someone sends me a product for review, there's no money being exchanged. So you can't deem that as advertising. You certainly can't deem that as advertising with the intent to sell within South Australia, because, you know, if Wotofo sends me something from China, how is that promoting the sale of it in South Australia? It's not.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't affect me as far as we can tell.
Yeah.
But if it did, I'm fucking off to New Zealand, man. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. I'm not going to stop helping people find products, to know about products, to hear about this life, you know, saving technology that we have. I'm not going to fucking stop that. I'm way too invested. My eggs are all in this basket now. I've quit my normal job. I'm not going back.
This is a massive thing, and this could also, depending on how the take up is in the sort of southern Australian areas, how if that's going to impact Northern Australia, or if that could have sort of repercussions in other places in the world.
Yeah, well, we've already seen that. I think shortly after the South Australian government announced its regulations, I heard the other day word from the Northern Territory, which is usually the last place to regulate anything. They're our last cowboy state. Up north, where you know, it's kind of a free-for-all still, and they've just brought in some really damning legislation as well, which I haven't fully got into the research on, but it doesn't sound good either. So yeah, it already looks like some other states are kind of going, oh well, South Australia's fucking done it, well, we'll ban it as well.
Yeah. And that could, I mean, so far New Zealand has been pretty close. Now, I don't know the politics between Australia and New Zealand, but New Zealand's been reasonably good when it comes to vaping as far as...
New Zealand's been great.
Yeah.
New Zealand had the same legislation. So in Australia, the reason we can't sell nicotine is a pre-existing law that puts nicotine in the Section 7 Poisons Act. which basically prevents the sale and supply of nicotine,
Yeah.
unless approved by the TGA, which is the Therapeutic Goods Administration. And so nicotine in your patches and your gum and your lozenges and your spray is all approved by the TGA because there's had some pockets lined.
Yeah.
And vaping has not been approved by that. New Zealand, we've got the same law. Nicotine's not legal outside of patches and gums, but we can see that it has a very valuable effect in e-juice, and we're going to exempt it from the Section 7 poisons. So now in New Zealand, you can sell juice with nicotine, and it's like you have in the United States. And so they've been very, very pro on it. You know, their government has looked at it and went, this is the most effective way for people to quit smoking.
Yeah.
We want to eliminate smoking completely by, I think, 2025 or something crazy like that. They've got real targets and ambitions to actually get people away from cigarettes. And they've gone, you know what, this is the most effective way to do it. There is some pressure and some negative pushback from some politicians in New Zealand. But generally, overall, it's been very, very positive.
Gotcha. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Is there anything that vapers either in Australia or around the world can do to help at this point in time?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, the South Australian legislation has been done. They basically they hoodwinked us in terms of bringing in proposed legislation 2 years ago, and then through government changes and then politicians who were looking after certain portfolios that were involved with the e-cigarette regulation lost their portfolios. And so with government turmoil and change of government, the new government came in and basically went, this is what we're doing. No fucking consultation period. Here's the laws. Fucking suck it up. Done. And so we had no real chance to fight and battle it.
Yeah.
When this government took control.
Yeah.
So what it leaves us with is really only one opportunity. There's very, very low chance of us ever overturning these laws on a state level, getting, the ministers and the governments actually in power to wheel back or to roll back those regulations. They're not going to do that. It never happens with any sort of legislation. But we do have a federal legislation or federal government election looming in the next few months. And if something is brought in, we're obviously similar to your sort of political system, a bit different to the United States in that if a state government brings in a law that says no this or that, but then the federal government says, yes, we are allowing this federal law, that supersedes the state governments.
Gotcha.
So we have an opportunity to fix this by getting the federal legislation right.
Okay.
So that's why we need every Australian to be writing their member of parliament at a federal level and telling them, you have not got my fucking vote unless you are pro-vaping.
Yeah. Yeah, and explaining how vaping has helped that individual as well. So a real case, not typing an email going, "Oh, you're a bunch of wankers."
Don't talk like me. Be nice and polite. Don't tell them to fuck off and they're a bunch of wankers. As much as you want to say that, do the bright thing and tell them how you found vaping, how it changed your life, how it helped you get off cigarettes, and how nicotine was crucial and integral to you getting off of the cigarettes through vaping.
Yeah.
And finally, that if they're not going to support the legalization of vaping and the legalization of nicotine in e-juice, then you simply won't be voting for them. Use our votes to make it count.
100%.
Because at the end of the day, the politicians don't care about vaping. They don't give a fuck about you or that your grandma got off the durries after 80 years of smoking. All they care about is making sure they get re-elected next fucking election.
Yeah.
So make them think. Make them fucking think, dickheads.
Absolutely. So I don't know if
we need to do our bit.
I don't know if you've got the same thing over there, but over here we've got a website that you can go to and you can put in your area code and
correct,
and it'll find stuff. So you've got something
I'll send
like
you
that?
the link.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link so that you can put in the description for Australians to find your local member of parliament and then write them an email.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Okay, so that's something that people can do. Is there petitions and things involved? I mean, generally over here, petitions do nothing. But
it's about the same over here. There has been some petitions done. There was a great organisation called Legalise Vaping. They did a petition for a while. I don't know whether that really had any sort of impact on the government. We do have a bunch of federal, and that's what I suppose is the hope that we have is that there are a number of federal politicians who are pro-vaping. We had a politician actually vaping in Parliament whipped out a little cigar-like and had a puff, had a toot in Parliament and ruffled a few feathers and caused a bit of a stir. And you know, we need those politicians. And people go, oh, but, you know, I don't agree with their political views, or, you know, their migration policy is not good, or they're a fucking Christian, or they're a fucking Buddhist, or fucking put that aside. Put their other policies aside and look at the reality, and that is that this is going to cost people's lives if we don't fucking fix this. We're going to be on the wrong side of history, and if we don't put our petty political differences aside and focus on the politicians that are pro-vaping, we're fucked, and we're fucking done. Yeah. Australia is a nanny state, and they will very, very easily and without a fucking thought outlaw anything that basically goes against their interests. They don't give a shit about what you think. They only care about votes.
Yeah. So I'll make sure that all the links of everything are down below. Have you done a dedicated video on this as yet?
Yeah, I did a video a while back talking about when they first were proposed and a few things. Nothing has really I mean, I could do a new video, but nothing has really changed from that. Everything that I talked about in terms of the impending doom has come to fruition.
Okay.
So, I mean, I could do another video, but really, you know, I'll send you the link to the first video I did, and it goes through all of it.
Gotcha. I will link to it down below just in case anyone wants to see your pretty face in full HD. So we'll get that going on. But yeah, it's dark times ahead for a little while. And finally, one last question. Is there any advocacy groups over there that people can join up to and support?
Yeah, so we have one main group called Avatar, AVATAR. It's basically for the businesses and for the people involved in the industry to keep up to date, but also for the consumers to keep up to date with what is going on and what's going to affect you. So you can donate to Avatar. I'll send you the link so that people can donate. The links are in my description of every video I post, and there's also a link there where you can keep up to date via email. Avatar will send you emails whenever they have news about what is going on.
Excellent. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. I think we should pull this to an end. And if you are watching this and you've stuck out to the end, first of all, thank you so much for doing that. But also, please do get involved. Is there anything that we can do actually around the world? Is there anything that that we can kind of, you know, highlight with regards to the importance of vaping?
People want to donate to Avatar, that's one thing internationals could do, whether it's $1 or $2, you know, it all helps. You know, imagine you get 5,000 Americans donating $1 to Australia. Hey, that's a lot of money that can be spent on lobbying the government and making some change. So, yeah, I mean, that would be one way. Otherwise, just keep talking about advocacy. Keep spreading the word, you know, keep educating people. You know, when you see someone that doesn't know what they're talking about and says vaping's bad, politely re-educate them.
Absolutely.
And don't be a cunt. Don't blow vape fucking clouds in front of babies, and just be polite, be etiquette. Just have some etiquette. Just stuff like that.
No blowing O's just to try and get your baby's head right in the middle of it for an Instagram pic. Right. Okay, buddy. Thank you so much for that. And thank everybody that's watching. Is there anything you want to finish off on?
No, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Anything you can do to spread the word about the battle that we have, and just be good cunts.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
Hopefully you can see that it's been a hugely important video and something that I wanted to put out there, just because the impact not only within South Australia itself, but also the potential for knocking on into other places in the world as well. So please look at the links that are going to be down below. Please get involved, and thank you so much for your time. Have it larger.